Hello, my friends. My name's Tom, and I am going to read this lovely work, a copy of a alchemical book. Compilation. It's famous for its accessibility to the English reading and speaking world. It was compiled in 1650, or published rather, in 1652 by Elias Ashmole, who is a member of the British Royal Society, founding member, and this copy that I am reading from is a PDF scanned from the personal owned copy of Carl Gustav Jung, C.G. Jung right there. So, let us begin. Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum, containing several poetical pieces of our famous English philosophers, who have written the Hermetic mysteries in their own ancient tongue, faithfully collected into one volume with annotations thereon, by Elias Ashmole Esquire, qui est Mercurio Filius Anglicus. The first part. Now, the reason that says the first part, there's a reason for that that's in the prologue. Published in London, printed 1652. Thus we begin. To all ingeniously elaborate students in the most divine mysteries of Hermetic learning. The subject of this ensuing work is a philosophical account of that eminent secret treasured up in the bosom of nature, which hath been sought for by many, but found by a few, notwithstanding experienced antiquity hath afforded the faithful, though not frequent, discoveries thereof. Past ages have, like rivers, conveyed down to us upon the float the more light and sophistical pieces of learning. But, what were profound and mysterious, the weight and solidity thereof sunk to the bottom, whence everyone who attempts to dive cannot easily fetch them up. So that what our Saviour said to his disciples may, I hope without offence, be spoken to the elected sons of art. Unto you it is given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of God, but to others in parables, that seeing they might not see, and hearing they might not understand. Our English philosophers generally, like prophets, have received little honor, unless what hath been privately paid them, in their own country, nor have they done any mighty works amongst us, except in covertly administering their medicine to a few sick and healing them. For greater experiments than what it performs in physics, they never publicly made show of. Thus did I.O., one of the first 4 fellows of the Fratres R.C., in curing the young Earl of Norfolk of the leprosy, and Dr. B in carrying off the virulency of the smallpox twice from Queen Elizabeth, insomuch that they never appeared. But in parts abroad they have found more noble reception, and the world, greedy of obtaining their works, nay, rather than want the sight thereof, contented to view them through a translation, though never so imperfect. Witness what Myrus, Hermanus, Combacius, Faber, and many others have done, the first of which came out of Germany to live in England, purposely that he might so understand our English tongue as to translate Norton's Ordinal into Latin verse, which most judiciously and learnedly he did. Yet, to our shame be it spoken, his entertainment was too coarse for so deserving a scholar. How great a blemish is it then to us that refuse to read so famous authors in our natural language, whilst strangers are necessitated to read them in ours, to understand them in their own, yet think the dignity of the subject much more deserving than their pains. If this we do but ingeniously consider, we shall judge it more of reason that we look back upon than neglect such pieces of learning as are natives of our own country, and by this inquisition find no nation hath written more or better, although at present, as well as through our own supineness as the decrees of fate, few of their works can be found. John Leland took very much pains, even at the yielding up of the ghost of our English learning, to preserve its latest, but weakest, because almost spent, breath, and from him, John Bale, with John Pitts, who indeed is but Bale's plagiary, hath left us a catalogue of the writers of this nation, and that's near all. Yet posterity for this is deeply obliged. What punishment, then, did their pestilent malice deserve, who robbed us of their whole works? A judicious author, speaking of the dissolution of our monasteries, saith thus: "Many manuscripts, guilty of no other superstition than red letters in the front, were condemned to the fire." And here a principal key of antiquity was lost to the great prejudice of posterity. Indeed, such was learning's misfortune at that great devastation of our English libraries that, where a red letter or a mathematical diagram appeared, they were sufficient to entitle the book to be popish or diabolical. Our English nation hath ever been happy for learning and learned men, and to illustrate this, I hope it will not prove distasteful. As first, the Druidae, the famous and mysterious Druidae, that were priests, diviners, and wise men, and took their original and name from Druius Saronius, the fourth king of the Celts, styled Sapientum et Argurum Doctor, who died Anno Mundi 2069. Next, the Bardi, who celebrated the illustrious deeds of famous men, which they ingeniously disposed in heroic verse, and sung them to the sweet melody of the harp. Amongst other testimonies hereof received Chaucer's. The old gentle Britons in her days, of divers adventures maiden lays, rhymed burst in her mother tongue, which lays with their instruments they sung. These philosophers had their name from Bardus Druidus, the fifth king of Celts, who was the first inventor of verses, as Barocius tells us, and died Anno Mundi 2138. Neither of these sects of philosophers used any writing, indeed it was not lawful, for such was the policy and curiosity of elder ages, to defend their learning and mysteries from the injury of ignorant interpretations, that they delivered them to posterity by tradition only. Caesar testifies, and 'tis a noble testimony, that the learning of the Druidae was first invented in Britain, and thence transferred into France, and that in all his time those of France came over hither to be instructed. Agricola, in Tacitus, prefers the Britons before the students of France, notwithstanding that they were of a docible wit and apt to learn, in that they were curious in attaining the eloquence of the Latin tongue. As for magic, Pliny tells us it flourished in Britain, and that the people there were so devoted to it, yea, with all the complements of ceremony. A man would think that even the Persian learned his magic thence. A German poet says that when the world was troubled with Pannonic invasions, England flourished in the knowledge of all good arts, and was able to send of her learned men into other countries to propagate learning. And instances, Winifred, alias Boniface the Devonshire man, and Willibrord, the northern man, that were sent into Germany. Nay more, England was twice schoolmistress to France, for so saith Peter Ramus, That is, first by the Druidae, who taught them their discipline, and afterwards by Alcuinius, in Charles the Great's time, through whose persuasions the emperor founded the University of Paris. For the Saxons, it is not to be denied, but that many of them, after their conversion to Christianity, were exceedingly learned, and before that, much addicted to soothsaying, augury, divination by the neighing of horses, etc. Et cetera is the Latin pronunciation. I'll say etc. from now on. And 'tis worth the inquiry, there being more in it than we ordinarily apprehend, why they in general worshipped Hertius, that is, Dame Earth, for a goddess, and honored Mercury above all the gods of the Germans, whom they called Woden, hence Wednesday, now our Wednesday. For they believed that this Dame Hertius intermediated in human affairs and relieved the poor, whose image was made armed, standing among flowers, having in its right hand a staff, and in it a banner, wherein was painted a rose, in the other hand a balance, and upon the head thereof a cock, on the breast a carved bear, and before the middle a fixed scutcheon, in chief whereof was also a balance. In face a lion, and in point a rose. And for their god Woden they esteemed him as their god of battle, representing him by an armed man. Insomuch that we to this very day retain the word wood among us, to signify fierce, furious, raging, as when one is in a great rage we usually say he is wood. So, the Mercury of the Philosophers is shadowed under the fierce and terrible names of lion, dragon, poison, etc. But this is not all, although it be something. And now to come yet nearer to ourselves. We must needs say that of latter times, since the conquest, our nation hath produced such famous and eminently learned men as have equaled, if not surpassed, the greatest scholars of other nations. And happy were we if now we could but partake of those legacies they left, and which envy and ignorance has defrauded us of. Howsoever the small remainder which is left, we have good reason to prize. For out of old fields, as men saith, come all this new corn from year to year, and out of old books, in good faith, come all this science that men leer. That England hath been successively enriched with such men, our countryman John Leland, and I never heard he was partial, abundantly testifies, who avers that generally we have had a great number of excellent wits and writers, learned with the best as time served, who besides their knowledge in the 4 tongues, in which part of them excelled, there was no liberal science or any feat concerning learning in which they have not showed certain arguments of great felicity and wit, and thus much for the generality of learning. Now for a particular account of the Hermetic science. Vouchsafe, ingenious reader, to accept the ensuing collections, yet not so as if therein were contained all the works of our English Hermetic philosophers, for more are designed in a second part to follow, and complete this a full Theatrum, the which God allowing me further time and tranquillity to run through it, as I have already this, I intend shortly to make ready for the press, whereby yet more to manifest what men we have had, no less famous for this kind of philosophy than for all other commendable arts and sciences. To add anything to the praise thereof were but to hold a candle before the sun. Or should I here deliver a full account of the marvelous operations and effects thereof, it would be as far beyond the limits of a preface, as remote from the belief of the generality of the world. nor do I expect that all my readers should come with an engagement to believe what I here write, or that there was ever any such thing in rerum natura as what we call a philosopher's stone, nor will I persuade them to it, though I must tell them I have not the vanity to publish these sacred and serious mysteries and arcana as romances. 'Tis enough that I know incredulity is given to the world as a punishment. Yet I'll tell them what one of our ancient poetical philosophers says. If you will listen to my lay, something thereby you may find that may content your mind. I will not swear to make you give credence, for a philosopher will find here in evidence of the truth. And to men that belay, I skill not greatly what they say. I must profess I know enough to hold my tongue, but not enough to speak. And the no less real than miraculous fruits I have found in my diligent inquiry into these arcana led me on to such degrees of admiration. They command silence and force me to lose my tongue. Yet, as one greatly affecting my native country, the satisfaction of all ingenious artists, I have published for their use these ensuing collected antiquities, and shall here say something more than they speak of. I would like to interject as the reader here and say, yes, as myself in the 21st century, like 350 years after Elias Ashmole published this, having read most of it many times and listened to myself in the recordings I've made, wonderful technology that we have today, centuries later, to be able to record ourselves and then re-listen 100 times in editing and publishing and then just enjoying it. What Elias Ashmole here has written is 100% true. There is much value in the mysterious, the wisdom that's hidden under simple narrative in rhyme. It's opened my eyes. And that's why one of the reasons why I made a project of putting it on the internet. Now to continue. He who shall have the happiness to meet with S. Dunstan's work, De Occulta Philosophia, a book which EGAI made much use of, and which shall chiefly back what here I am about to say, may therein read such stories as will make him be amazed to think what stupendous and immense things are to be performed by virtue of the philosopher's mercury, of which a taste only, and no more. And first, of the mineral stone, the which is wrought up to the degree only that hath the power of transmuting any imperfect earthly matter into its utmost degree of perfection. That is, to convert the basest of metals into perfect gold and silver, flints into all manner of precious stones, as rubies, sapphires, emeralds, and diamonds, etc., and many more experiments of the like nature. But as this is but a part, so it is that the least share of that blessing which may be acquired by the philosopher's Materia, if the full virtue thereof were known. Gold, I confess, is a delicious object, a goodly light, which we admire and gaze upon, ut pueri in irones avem. But as to make gold, saith an incomparable author, is the chiefest intent of the alchemists, so was it scarce any intent of the ancient philosophers, and the lowest use the Adepti made of this materia. For they, being lovers of wisdom, more than worldly wealth, drove at higher and more excellent operations. And certainly he to whom the whole course of nature lies open rejoiceth not so much that he can make gold and silver, or the devils to become subject to him, as that he sees the heavens open, the angels of God ascending and descending, and that his own name is fairly written in the book of life. Next, to come to the vegetable, magical, and angelical stones, the which have in them no part of the mineral stone, quatinus a stone, fermented with metalline and earthly nature. For they are marvelously subtle, and each of them differing in operation and nature, because fitted and fermented for several effects and purposes. Doubtless Adam, with the fathers before the flood and since, Abraham, Moses, and Solomon, wrought many wonders by them, yet the utmost of their virtues they never fully understood, nor indeed any, but God, the maker of all things in heaven and earth, blessed forevermore. For by the vegetable may be perfectly known the nature of man, beasts, fowls, fishes, together with all kinds of trees, plants, flowers, etc., and how to produce and make them grow, flourish, and bear fruit, how to increase them in color and smell, and when and where we please, and all this not only at an instant, experimenti gratia, but daily, monthly, yearly, at any time, at any season, yea, in the depth of winter, and therefore not unlike but the walnut tree which anciently grew in Glastonbury churchyard, and never put forth leaves before St. Barnaby's day, yet then was fully loaded with them, as also the hawthorn there, so greatly famed for shooting forth leaves and flowers at Christmas, together with the oak in New Forest in Hampshire that bore green leaves at the same season, may be some experiments made of the vegetable stone. Besides the masculine part, of which is wrought up to a solar quality, and through its exceeding heat will burn up and destroy any creature, plant, etc., that which is lunar and feminine, if immediately applied, will mitigate it with its extreme cold. And in the like manner, the lunar quality benumbs and congeals any animal, etc., unless it be presently helped and resolved by that of the sun. For though they both are made out of one natural substance, yet in working they have contrary qualities. Nevertheless, there is such a natural assistance between them that what the one cannot do, the other both can and will perform. Nor are their inward virtues more than their outward beauties. For the solar part is of so resplendent transparent luster that the eye of man is scarce able to endure it. And if the lunar part be exposed abroad in a dark night, birds will repair to and circulate about it, as they fly round a candle, and submit themselves to the captivity of the hand. And this invites me to believe that the stone which the ancient hermit, being then 140 years old, took out of the wall in his cell and showed Cornelius Gallus, anno 1602, was of the nature of this vegetable stone. For, upon the opening of his golden box wherein it was enclosed, it dilated its beams all over the room, and that with so great splendor, that it overcame the light that was kindled therein. Besides, the hermit refused to project it upon metal, as being unworthy of it, but made his experiment upon veronica and rue. By the magical, or prospective stone, it is possible to discover any person in what part of the world soever, although never so secretly concealed or hid, in chambers, closets, or caverns in the earth. For there it makes a strict inquisition. In a word, it fairly presents to your view even the whole world, wherein to behold, hear, or see your desire. Nay, more, it enables man to understand the language of the creatures, as the chirping of birds, lowing of beasts, etc., to convey a spirit into an image, which, by observing the influence of heavenly bodies, shall become a true oracle. And yet, this, as E.A. assures you, is not anyways necromantical or devilish, but easy, wondrous easy, natural, and honest. Lastly, as touching the angelical stone, it is so subtle, saith the aforesaid author, that it can neither be seen, felt, or weighed, but tasted only. The voice of man, which bears some proportion to these subtle properties, comes short in comparison. Nay, the air itself is not so penetrable, and yet, oh, mysterious wonder, a stone that will lodge in the fire to eternity without being prejudiced. It hath a divine power, celestial and invisible above the rest, and endows the possessor with divine gifts. It affords the apparition of angels, and gives a power of conversing with them by dreams and revelations. Nor dare any evil spirit approach the place where it lodgeth, because it is a quintessence wherein there is no corruptible thing, and where the elements are not corrupt, no devil can stay or abide. S. Dunstan calls it the food of angels, and by others it is termed the heavenly viaticum, the tree of life, and is undoubtedly, next under God, the true alcochodon, or giver of years, for by it man's body is preserved from corruption, being thereby enabled to live a long time without food. Now 'tis made a question whether any man can die that uses it, which I do not so much admire as to think why the possessors of it should desire to live, that have those manifestations of glory and eternity presented unto their fleshly eyes, but rather desire to be dissolved, and to enjoy the full fruition, than live where they must be content with the bare speculation. After Hermes had once obtained the knowledge of this stone, he gave over the use of all other stones, and therein only delighted. Moses and Solomon, together with Hermes, were the only three that excelled in the knowledge thereof, and who therewith wrought wonders. That there is a gift of prophecy hid in the red stone, Rhasis will tell you. For thereby, saith he, philosophers have foretold things to come, in Petrus Bonus averse, that they did prophesy not only generally, but specially, having a foreknowledge of the resurrection, incarnation of Christ, day of judgment, and that the world should be consumed with fire, and this not otherwise than from the insight of their operations. In brief, by the true and various use of the philosopher's Prima Materia, for there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit, the perfection of liberal sciences are made known. The whole wisdom of nature may be grasped, and, notwithstanding what has been said, I must further add, there are yet hid greater things than these, for we have seen but few of his works. Howbeit, there are but a few stalks that are fitted to inoculate the grafts of this science on. They are mysteries incommunicable to any but the Adepti, and those that have been devoted even from their cradles to serve and wait at this altar, and how rarely such have been heard of, may appear by Norton. For few, saith he, or scarcely one, in 15 kingdoms had our red stone. And they perhaps were, with St. Paul, caught up into paradise, and, as he heard unspeakable words, so they wrought unoperable works, such as it is not lawful for to utter. Of such as these, therefore, will I glory, yet of myself I will not glory, but of mine infirmities. And truly whether such were in the body or out of the body I cannot tell. God knoweth. Doubtless they were not far from the kingdom of God. But I fear I have waited too far, and therefore now to give some particular account as well touching the publication of this work, as also the disposition thereof, and the nature of the obsolete language wherein 'tis written. I shall in the first place acquaint the reader that the kind acceptance my former endeavors received at the hands of candid artists in publishing some chemical collections very earnestly invited me to find out a second piece wherewith to present those grateful persons. Whereupon I intended to rally up some of my own conceptions in this science, and expose them also to the test. But, to this end, reviewing the Philosophers, I found that many, assuming the name, wrote what their fancies, not their hands, had wrought, and further than in apprehension had not seen projection, amongst whom our Ripley was sometime one, as appears by his ingenious retraction hereafter mentioned. I'll note on that too. And being truly sensible of the great injury such works have done young students, at the first not able to distinguish, who have written upon their undeceivable experience, who not, and consequently not which to follow or which to avoid. I withdrew my thoughts, having never as yet set myself effectually upon the manual practice, lest I should add to the many injuries the world has already suffered by delivering the bare medley of my dubious apprehensions, without the confident attestation of practice, and be justly esteemed as indiscreet as those whom Ripley mentions, that prate of Robin Hood and of his bow, which never shot therein I trow. That's the end of the sentence and paragraph. My note will be the two opening works. They last about 200 pages of Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum. The first is Thomas Norton's Ordinal of Alchemy, and the following second is George Ripley's Compound of Alchemy. Norton's Ordinal is about 7 chapters, so the 100 pages. Ripley's is a lot more broken up into 12 gates, 12 chapters, plus recap chapter, and then an errors he admits to for much of his career was deceived or writing in error, trying to make a go of things. Thus, that's my in this aside here, reading the prologue, is an elaboration in the context right here, amongst whom our Ripley was sometime one, as appears in his ingenious retraction hereafter mentioned. Both of Norton and Thomas Norton and George Ripley make strong recommendations to be wary of false teachers. Which is also a strong warning in the Bible, because the world is full of people that have a little bit of truth and the rest is just hot air. And it comes worse when these people are trying to instruct you in how to burn and mix chemicals and apply a product of various processes to people as medicines, and you don't even know what you're doing. Not a good way to operate in life, and probably a lot of more people died by false alchemists and false, let's say, the corrupt alchemists than those who are true natural philosophers and medical practitioners. And I continue. Thank you for bearing with me in that aside. Yet still casting about what to make choice of, at length, by the encouragement of some that are industrious after public benefit, centered my thoughts and fixed them on this design by collecting all, or as many as I could meet with, of our English Hermetic philosophers, and to make them public. Nor did I change this resolution with my clothes, notwithstanding the difficulties I saw, ready to encounter and obstruct the undertaking. For besides the pains and care that was thereunto requisite, the fear of not meeting with, or obtaining the original manuscripts or authentic copies of this nature, which I knew to be in some men's hands, yet wanting them myself, shrewdly beset, though nothing discouraged me. Yet was I therewith freely and plentifully supplied by some worthy and intimate friends, whom I would gladly mention here, but that I well know they delight not to see their names in print. These had, my care was next to dispose them in such a series as might be answerable to the respective times, wherein each author flourished, and withal to the best advantage of the laborious student, the which I have managed with so just an adequation, as I hope, will neither detract from the due honor of the one, nor yet disturb or darken the direct path of the other. Let me read that again. It's referring to the author and the student that intends to learn in the future. These works, the works provided by his dear and intimate friends, my care was next to dispose them in such a series as might be answerable to the respective times, wherein each author flourished. So yes, in the back of Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum, there's about 50 pages of annotations, and a lot of it's historical, and trying to identify the historical context of which the author was in, and who knows who, John Dee and Edward Kelly, etc., etc., and John Gower and Chaucer, I believe. And okay, let's see, author first. And withal, to the best advantage of the laborious student, the which I have managed with so just an adequation, as, I hope, will neither detract from the due honor of the one, nor yet disturb or darken the direct path of the other. But whilst I was doing this, I made a question in regards some philosophers had writ in verse, others in prose. Which of these should take precedency? And after some consideration, adjudged it to the poetic part, and that, not only because its original may probably anticipate the time of Orpheus, although he be noted by Maris, Primus Antistes, Sarcados Theologus, Vates et Doctor Toteus, Graecorum Nationes, because that Linnaeus is said to be the most perite of any lyric poet, and so ancient that some suppose him master to Orpheus, who writ that admirable allegory of the Golden Fleece, and was the first of all the Grecians that brought the chemic learning, with other sciences, out of Egypt, as the other, the first that brought the Phoenician learning to the Grecians. I say, not only for that it is the ancientest, and prose but a later use with other nations, but because poetry hath been most anciently used with us, and, as if from a grant of nature, held unquestionable. Again, The excellent melody thereof is so natural and universal, as that it seems to be born with all the nations of the world, as an hereditary eloquence proper to all mankind. Nor was this all, for I considered that it claims a general succession and reception in all nations, all ages, who were never without a Homer, a Virgil, or an Ovid. No, not this small segment of the world, England, without a Rhasis Castrensis and an Hortulanus. For the first of these, his Liber Luminum and his Lumenum de Luminum, are the ancientest now extant in Latin verse, in the latter of which I cannot omit this title of his: Responsio Rhasis Castrensis Filio suo Merlino, whereby it appears he was Merlin's contemporary, at least, if not his master, in this abstruse mystery. These works of his are published by Hermanus, but very imperfectly, as I found by comparing them with a manuscript as ancient as King John's time. And for the second, he was the first Christian philosopher after Morianus, who, traveling abroad and returning hither in the reign of William the Conqueror, because he was the first that transplanted the chemical muses from remotest parts into his own country, is called Garland, ab Coranum Hermeticum et Poeticum. But, to return to our matter. If neither its antiquity, nor the natural ratification, general succession, and reception thereof were enough to allow it the right hand of fellowship, yet I suppose the effects thereof, which so affect and delight the ear, rejoice the heart, satisfy the judgment, and indulge the hearers, justly may. In regard, poesy has a life, a pulse, and such a secret energy as leaves in the mind a far deeper impression than what runs in the slow and evenless numbers of prose, whereby it won so much upon the world, that in rude times, and even amongst barbarous nations, when other sorts of learning stood excluded, there was nothing more in estimation. And for that we call rhyme. The custom of divers of our Saxon and Norman poets shows the opinion they had thereof, whilst the Latin, notwithstanding its excellency, could not sufficiently delight their ears, unless their verses in that language were formed with a harmonical cadence and brought into rhyme. Nor did the ancients wrap up their chiefest mysteries anywhere else than in the parabolical and elusive part of poetry, as the most sacred and venerable in their esteem, and the securest from profane and vulgar wits. For such was the goodness of our fathers, that they would not willingly hazard, much less throw, their children's bread among the dogs, and therefore their wisdom and policy was, first, to find out a way to teach, and then an art, which was this, to conceal. In a word, to prefer prose before poetry is no other or better than to let a rough-hewn clown take the wall of a rich-clad lady of honor, or to hang a priest's chamber with tarpaulin instead of tapestry. And for these reasons, and out of these respects, the poetical, as I conceived, deserved the precedency. Howbeit, probably some of these pieces, now brought to public light, had well nigh perished in a silent ruin, and destruction got a complete victory over them, but that my diligence and laborious inquisition rescued them from the jaws thereof, being almost quite shrouded in the dust of antiquity, and involved in the obscurity of forgotten things, with their leaves half worm-eaten. And a wonder it is, that, like the creatures in Noah's Ark, they were hitherto so safely preserved from that universal deluge which, at the dissolution of the abbeys, overflowed our greatest libraries. And in doing thus, I presume it no arrogance to challenge the reputation of performing a work, next that of a man's own, and something more, in that, as if having the elixir itself, I have made old age become young and lively by restoring each of the ancient writers not only to the spring of their several beauties, but to the summer of their strength and perfection. As for the whole work itself, it is sheaved up from a few gleanings in part of our English fields, where, though I have bestowed my industry to pick up here and there what I could find in my way, yet I believe there are many other pieces of this nature in private hands, which, if any are pleased, out of the same ingenious score that I have published these, to communicate to me, I shall set thereon a value suitable to the worth of their favors, and let the world know its obligation to them besides. The style and language thereof may, I confess, to some seem irksome and uncouth, and so it is indeed to those that are strangers thereunto. Yes, as a 21st century reader I can attest to that, but over the last year I've managed a little bit to be able to manage well enough that now 2 years on I can read this even the 1600s prologue with a little bit more bounce and enjoyable cadence, I hope. Thus, reading this, I would like to say I hope that the reading of the prologue, written 350 years ago, meets with favor upon an ear. Let me restart this sentence. The style and language thereof may, I confess, to some, seem irksome and uncouth, and so it is indeed to those that are strangers thereunto, but withal very significant. Old words have strong emphasis. Others may look upon them as rubbish or trifles, but they are grossly mistaken. For what some light brains may esteem as foolish toys, deeper judgments can and will value as sound and serious matter. We English have often varied our fashions. Such is the levity of our fancies. And therefore, if you meet with spellings different from those in use, or uncouth words, as strangely ridiculous as a maunch, hood, codpiece, or a trunk hose, know, as they were the fashionable attires, so these the usual dialects of those times, and posterity will pay us in our own coin, should we deride the behavior and dress of our ancestors. For we must consider the languages which are daily used in our discourses are in as continual mutation. What custom brings into habit is best liked for the present, whether it be to revive what is lost, or introduce something new, or to piece up the present with the retained shreds of what preceded. But learned tongues, which are contained in books, enjoy a more immutable fate, because not subject to be washed away with the daily tide and current of the times. They are like the fashion and drapery wrought on marble statues, which must ever be retained without alteration. And therefore, that the truth and worth of their works might receive no diminution by my transcription, I purposely retained the old words and manner of their spelling as I found them in the originals, except only some palpable mistakes and blemishes of former transcribers, which I took upon me to correct and purge as little more than literal imperfections. Yet not to leave the reader unsatisfied, have added a compendious table for the interpretation of old, unusual, and obsolete words, and thereby smoothed, as I suppose, the passage for such as have not hitherto been conversant in these ancient rough-hewed expressions. Wherefore, you that love to converse with the dead, or consult with their monuments, draw near. Perhaps you may find more benefit in them than the living. There you may meet with the genii of our Hermetic philosophers, learn the language in which they wooed and courted Dame Nature, and enjoy them more freely and at greater command to satisfy your doubts than when they were in the flesh, for they have written more than they would speak, and left their lines so rich as if they had dissolved gold in their ink, and clad their words with the sovereign moisture. My annotations are limited within the bounds of what is historical, or what occasionally must needs entrench on the confines of other arts, and all glosses upon the philosophical work purposely omitted, for the same reasons that I chose to send forth other men's children into the world rather than my own. And what presumptuous mistakes or errors the candid reader shall meet with will, I hope, be censured with no less favour and charity than that whereby they are wont to judge the faults of those they esteem their friends and well-wishers. And now to conclude, may the God of nature be graciously pleased, out of the immense treasury of his goodness, to vouchsafe all such, whose good angels direct them to, or have already religiously engaged them in this mysterious knowledge, the full and entire accomplishments of a true and pious philosopher, to wit, learning, humility, judgment, courage, hope, patience, discretion, charity, and secrecy, that so they may enjoy the fruits of their labors, which otherwise will be but vain and unpleasant, and causelessly render the divine science and secret itself contemptible. Farewell, industrious students, and let your goodness still invite me to accomplish the end I have proposed, in doing which, I presume, you may one day esteem me better deserving your patronage, at leastwise your charitable censure, which is all the recompense expected or merited by him who is yours really devoted, Elias Ashmole, 26th of January, 1652. Thus ends the prologue, the introduction to Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum. Now, I've read and published my own reading on the Ordinal of Alchemy and Compound of Alchemy. Let's see, where's that here? There we go. The Compound of Alchemy. I'm going to actually make a quick note. There are some places in here where, like, you see little hand, I can't remember the name of the little scribbly note and hand. But I've wondered, no, that's like a Mercury symbol there. I've wondered some days if this was actually Carl Jung's own notes by hand. But since this was published in 1650s, and Jung only just started his collection, I believe, in the 1920s, late 20s, 1928 or 29, when he received the draft of Richard Wilhelm's The Secret of the Golden Flower, led him away from his experiments in the Red Book and into alchemy for decades. And thus this book, amongst thousands of others, are scanned after the compound. You have, Liber Patris Sapientiae, which is one of my favorite of this book. Which I've read. I listened to that myself just because I enjoy the words. Liber Patris Sapientiae. Thou that in this book beginnest to read, keep well this counsel, the better shalt thou speed. Be thou in a place secret, by thyself alone, that no man see or hear what thou shalt say or do, etc. There's some pretty fun stuff, pretty funny expressions in this I really like Liber Patris Sapientiae. And Hermes Bird comes following, and this threefold and fourfold work. I started reading Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum in 2022 after investigating Carl Jung's The Transcendent Function, technical psychological document on practice of active imagination, which also references the transference. The psychology of the transference is in another book. It references psychology and alchemy. And if a person wants to get into understanding the transference, they would be best to understand the content in the psychology of alchemy. And when I was beginning to read the prologue, I found this. And this, I thought, this is such a gorgeous, where is it? Where does it come from? Well, it comes from Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum. So I looked up, and I enjoy, and I hope that others may enjoy the fact this reading has come from Carl Jung's personal copy. And I look forward to hearing any comments you may have, and adieu.